All right, welcome back, everybody. We are going to be discussing Sixth Man of the Year award in this video. So, obviously, Montrezl Harrell takes home the award, placing numbers of 18.6 points per game, 7.8 rebounds, and in only 27.8 minutes per game. Obviously, coming off the bench, but playing starter minutes. Rourke, we'll get right into it. You tend to disagree with this pick.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I love Montrez. Started his career in Houston and was able to really flourish. I definitely think Houston should have hung on to him, but we had a deal to get Chris Paul a few years ago. But Montrez is really hasn't looked back since he got on the Clippers. And he was a six-man contender last year. Obviously, him and Lou Will coming off the bench for the Clippers, they run the second unit. They are pretty much the offense, and Montrez closes out games for the Clippers, obviously. And so it's not like he's just a bench player. Like, he's really a starter, but they just use him to bring in the offense for the second unit and run that pick and roll with Lou Will. And so, like you said, Montrez had some great stats. Nothing against him, but I definitely think that Dennis Schroeder did get snubbed, or as we call him, Schmerda. Dennis Schmerda is by far, I think, the clear pick for Sixth Man of the Year. If you just look at what Schroeder did for OKC and his impact on OKC, and you compare that to Montrez or Lou Will for the Clippers, it's not even comparable in terms of how much value Schroeder added to OKC. He was their second best player. Chris Paul at times, but you would actively see Chris Paul defer to Schroeder and entice Schroeder to lead the offense and to score buckets, especially down the line in the playoffs against Houston in the first round. Schroeder was the key offense, and if he was not playing well, OKC had no chance. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is the future of OKC, but right now there is no doubt that Schroeder is the second best player on the team, and he was averaging 19 points. He averaged more. He shot career highs from three. I think it was like about 38 or almost 39%, which is absurd for a guy like Schroeder, who attacks the rim and is known more as an attacker, not a shooter. But able to create for teammates. And I think the impact that Schroeder added, I think he played about 30 minutes, same as Montrez. These guys are playing about 30 minutes a game, and obviously closing out games. But you could see that OKC led the league in clutch points. And their death lineup, per se, with their three-headed guards with Shea, Chris, and Schroeder, they had the best lineup to close out games. They also had Steven Adams and Gallo to close it out with them. But the point is, when he was on the floor with that starting unit, they had the highest plus-minus team of any team, and they were the best in clutch situations to close out games. Chris Paul led the league in clutch points that helped him out, but the point is that Schroeder was able to put his team in winning positions and close out games. And that doesn't even talk about why I think he still has better stats with averaging more points and shooting better. But Montrez, you could give it to anyone. I think Lou Will won it the last 2 years, so he's more than happy giving it to his teammate Montrez. But you're right, case could be made for any of them. I just think Schroeder played perfect this year, filled that six-man role perfectly. And it's all right.
Absolutely. Schroeder obviously did come off the bench and played a great role for OKC. And obviously watching him in the Houston series that just recently passed was a very impactful, very frustrating player for the Rockets to deal with. Now, I think another interesting wrinkle to this Sixth Man of the Year award this year is which teammate do you give it to, right? If you take Schroeder out of the mix, you've got Lou Will, you've got Montrez. And Lou Will, honestly, had a great season, right? 18 points per game, 3 rebounds, a little over 5 assists a game in 28 minutes. So it kind of played the same amount of time as Montrez did. And I think the only case you can really make is how much more Montrez impacts the defensive and offensive end than Lou Will does. Obviously, he has a defensive. I think it's a little over exaggerated to say a defensive liability, but he's definitely not guarding your best player as a preference. So, Lou Will kind of did what he always does, right? Gives you around 20 points per game. But I think the biggest jump that he took this year was in his playmaking, right? Average around 5 assists, really being the primary ball handler when he's out there, and kind of taking on more point guard duties than just, all right, go out and be a flamethrower on offense, something you would associate with J.R. Smith, but obviously in a more ball handling dominant role, right? But I definitely think Montrez impacts both the defensive and the offensive end a little bit more coming off the bench than Lou Will does. So that's why I agree with the pick. I think Montrez was a great selection.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point you got about Lou Will really kind of transitioning into creating offense more for other people this year. In the past, we saw him more as like a Jordan Clarkson type right now. You know, Jordan Clarkson comes in the game for Utah with the primary duty of scoring the basketball, and it made sense in past years for the Clippers team. You needed a guy like Lou Will to come in and score. But when you take the transition of adding Paul George and Kawhi Leonard this year, you can see how Lou Will kind of changes his perception of his role on the team to try to get these other guys involved. But even with that said, you look at his stats, they were primarily identical over the last few years when he won six man of the year. Like you said, though, his assists were just a little bit up because he's creating for other people. But his points, right? I mean, he's a 20-point scorer. I mean, 18, sure. Okay, 2 points less, whatever. But yeah, he still had a phenomenal year. You could give it to any of these guys.